I'm Claire Morgan, 32 years old, and until last spring, I thought my life was solid, married, stable, safe. But while I was lying in a hospital bed recovering from surgery, everything I believed in was being stolen. My husband wasn't by my side. My stepsister wasn't checking on me. They were standing together at an altar, saying vows behind my back. When I found out, it didn't just break me, it reshaped me. Because the house they thought they'd come home to wasn't waiting for them. I was. And by the time they stepped off their honeymoon flight, hand in hand, I had already planned their downfall. What started as betrayal turned into a war of control. They tried to ruin me, but instead, I left them standing on the street with nothing. The monitors in the hospital room beeped with a steady rhythm, each sound reminding me I was alive, though my body felt like a stranger's. Tubes fed into my veins, the white walls pressed in, and for days my world shrank to the flicker of nurses' shoes and the hollow reassurance of doctors. I had clung to the thought that at least I wasn't alone. I had a husband who promised me forever and a stepsister who claimed she would always have my back. That illusion shattered the moment I picked up my phone. It wasn't a call that broke me, it was a photo. A mutual friend, unknowing, sent it with a cheerful caption. My husband, Mark, in a tailored suit, his arm wrapped around my stepsister, Lily, her face glowing as though she had stolen my life and worn it like a crown. They weren't just together. They were married. The date printed below their grinning faces confirmed it. Just 3 days earlier, while I lay in recovery, unable to even climb out of bed, they had stood before a judge and exchanged vows. I remember staring at the picture until the colors blurred. Betrayal isn't sharp at first. It's heavy, a weight pressing into every bone. My chest ached, but not from the stitches beneath my gown. It was the realization that the two people I trusted most had already buried me in their minds. I was supposed to be forgotten, a discarded chapter, while they began their fresh story together. Neither of them visited. Not a single message from Mark asking how the surgery went. Not a single text from Lily checking if I needed someone to hold my hand. They had taken the time instead to book themselves a honeymoon in Greece, their smiling faces splashed across social media. Each post was a knife, twisted deeper. Every caption about new beginnings mocked the life they had ripped away from me. But grief has its limits. After the tears, after the nights spent staring at the ceiling in the hospital, something colder rose inside me. I wasn't going to beg for answers. I wasn't going to crumble. If they had written me out of their lives so easily, then I would rewrite the ending myself. The house became my weapon. Mark and I had bought it together, but the inheritance from my late father had covered the down payment, and I had made sure the title was under my name. While they were sipping cocktails by the sea, I sat with my lawyer. Every document, every loophole, every signature became a brick in the wall I was building to keep them out. I didn't speak about revenge. I didn't cry about betrayal. I worked quietly, efficiently, until my future was secured, and theirs was dismantled. By the time my discharge papers were signed, the locks on the house were already changed. The deed was updated. My lawyer had prepared the eviction notice in a folder so thick it looked like a novel. I walked out of the hospital not as a broken woman, but as someone ready to watch the collapse of the illusion they had built. The day they came back, the sky was heavy with summer heat. I stood in the living room, the curtains drawn, the silence of the house wrapping around me like armor. Their car pulled into the driveway, a shiny rental that screamed of someone trying too hard to look important. I didn't rush to the window. I didn't need to. I could feel the arrogance in the way they slammed the doors, laughing, their voices carrying before they even reached the porch. Lily's laugh was high-pitched, rehearsed. Mark's voice followed, deeper, smug, the sound of a man who believed he had won something. My stomach turned, but I stayed rooted, calm, waiting. The first rattle of the doorknob was sharp, followed by the pause when it didn't open. A second attempt, the scrape of a key, then silence. I imagined the confusion stretching across their faces. The third attempt was louder, frantic. Finally, the knock came. Hard. Honey. Mark's voice, muffled but uncertain now. Honey. He still thought he could call me that. I opened the door slowly, not enough to welcome them, just enough to stand in the frame, my lawyer's folder clutched in my hand. The sight of them was almost surreal. Mark, tanned, his hair slicked back as though he was auditioning for the role of perfect husband. Lily beside him in a floral dress, her eyes widening when she saw me, her skin flushing with the kind of guilt she couldn't disguise. "You're back early," I said, my tone flat, practiced. Mark's mouth opened, but no words came. Lily tried first. "We thought you were still in recovery." I handed them the folder. The eviction papers sat neatly on top, my name bold across every page. "This is no longer your home." Mark frowned, reaching for bluster, but I could see the panic already crawling across his face. "What do you mean?" "I live here." "You did," I corrected. "The locks are changed. The deed is mine. Every cent you thought you could claim is gone. You signed nothing. You own nothing." Lily's hand clutched his arm, her perfect manicure trembling. "She can't do this, Mark." But I already had. The silence stretched, broken only by the hum of cicadas outside. They stared at me as though I had pulled the floor out from under them, and maybe I had. They thought their betrayal would leave me collapsed, powerless. Instead, I had turned their triumph into quicksand, each second dragging them deeper into the reality they didn't want to face. I didn't slam the door in their faces. That would have been too merciful. I stepped back just enough to let them see the boxes stacked in the entryway, their few belongings already packed, waiting on the porch like abandoned luggage. Every detail was deliberate. Every move I had made was designed not just to take back what was mine, but to remind them that they had underestimated me. Mark's voice finally broke the silence. "This is ridiculous. You can't just throw us out." I met his gaze, steady. "Watch me." And with that, I closed the door. The morning after I shut the door in their faces, I woke up expecting a knock, a call, maybe even the sound of police sirens if they were bold enough to make a scene. But the house was quiet. I moved through the kitchen, poured myself coffee, and sat by the window as sunlight stretched across the street. Their car was still parked at the curb, its doors locked, the trunk stuffed with luggage they hadn't touched. It didn't take long for the games to begin. By noon, I heard voices outside, Mark's loud and clipped, Lily's sharp with panic. They weren't leaving. They were on the phone, pacing up and down the sidewalk, gesturing wildly like two actors in a play no one cared to watch. I didn't bother stepping outside. Instead, I let them stew in the heat, my blinds pulled just enough so I could see their desperation unfold. That afternoon, an envelope slid beneath my door. Their handwriting, messy and rushed. It wasn't an apology. It was a demand. Mark wrote that I had no right to change the locks. He threatened to call a lawyer, to prove that as my husband, half the house belonged to him. He even tried to soften it with a line about working things out, as if his betrayal was a misunderstanding we could fix over dinner. I placed the letter on the counter and let it sit. By evening, I handed it to my attorney, who didn't even blink. "They have no legal ground," she assured me. "Your inheritance paid for this home. The deed is solely under your name. Their marriage is irrelevant. He signed nothing. They have nothing." Her certainty was fuel. I wanted Mark and Lily to know I wasn't bluffing, so I gave her permission to send the official reply. A packet went out the next day, stamped and sealed, spelling out every detail of their eviction and the consequences if they tried to trespass again. But Mark never was the type to take quiet defeat. That evening, I heard banging on the front door, louder than before, aggressive, a fist pounding with the kind of anger that comes when a man realizes his charm no longer works. "Open the door, Claire," he shouted, his voice carrying across the neighborhood. "We need to talk about this." I stood in the hallway, my arms folded, listening. Lily's voice cut in, shrill and desperate. "Please, Claire, don't do this. We'll find a way to make it right." But I didn't answer. The silence was its own weapon. I knew the neighbors were watching, blinds twitching, curious eyes landing on the golden couple unraveling at my doorstep. Every second they stood there, yelling into the wood, their perfect image cracked. That humiliation was exactly what I wanted. When the banging didn't work, they tried another tactic. 2 days later, I returned from a meeting with my lawyer to find them sitting on the curb, their luggage spread around them like cast-off trophies from a trip no one cared about. They looked smaller somehow, their smiles gone, their clothes wrinkled from nights in the car. Lily stood when she saw me, brushing at her hair as though fixing it would change the reality. "Claire, please," she started, her tone softer this time. "We made a mistake. But we're family. You can't just leave us with nothing." Her voice shook, and for a moment, I saw the girl who used to borrow my clothes, who used to cry on my shoulder after fights with her boyfriends. But then I remembered the photo of her in a wedding dress beside my husband, and the sympathy drained away. Mark stepped forward, his eyes hard. "This isn't over. You think you've won, but you haven't. I'll get my share. I'll fight this." I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and looked him straight in the eye before closing it again without a word. Their footsteps stayed outside longer this time, shuffling, pacing, until finally, the sound of the car starting broke the silence. That night, I expected a moment of relief, but instead I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I wasn't afraid of them taking back the house. That was impossible. What unsettled me was the thought of what they might try next. Mark was proud, reckless when cornered. Lily was unpredictable, willing to cling to anyone who promised her security. Together, they were dangerous not because they had power, but because they had lost it. The next move came faster than I thought. 3 days later, a letter arrived from their attorney, claiming Mark was entitled to marital assets and demanding a share of the property. My lawyer laughed when she read it. "They're throwing stones in the dark," she said. "We'll crush this in court if it comes to that." Still, I knew this was only the beginning. They weren't just fighting for a house. They were fighting to prove they hadn't ruined their lives with one selfish decision. And that made them unpredictable. I prepared myself. Security cameras went up around the property. I changed the alarm codes, notified the police about the ongoing eviction, and kept every document filed neatly in a folder by the door. If they wanted a war, I would fight it with precision, every move legal, every step crushing. But what I didn't expect was how quickly the world around them started to crumble. Their friends, the same ones who had cheered at their wedding, now whispered behind their backs. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid their drama. Employers weren't impressed with the scandal plastered across social media, photos of their honeymoon now mocked by captions about betrayal. Their shiny life dulled in weeks, and every door they knocked on seemed to close. One evening, as I drove home, I saw them again, sitting outside a cheap motel on the edge of town, arguing by the trunk of their car. Their voices carried even across the parking lot. Lily was crying, waving her arms, while Mark shouted, his face red, his hands clenched. They didn't see me, but I saw enough to know their foundation was already cracking. I should have felt satisfied, but instead I felt something sharper, something like anticipation. They weren't going to fade quietly. They would come back, desperate, furious, convinced they could claw their way into my life again. And when they did, I would be ready. By the time the week ended, my prediction came true. Another knock on the door. Quieter this time, almost cautious. When I opened it, Lily stood there alone, her eyes red, her voice barely above a whisper. "Claire, please. I can't do this anymore. Mark doesn't care about me the way he said he did. I thought I was winning something, but I lost everything. Can't you just let me stay? Just for a while?" I looked at her, and for the first time, I saw not the enemy, but the hollow shadow of the girl who had once been my sister in name, if not in blood. But pity was a luxury I couldn't afford. She had chosen her side the moment she slipped on that wedding ring. I shook my head, steady. "You made your bed, Lily. Now lie in it." Her tears spilled, her shoulders sagged, and without another word, she turned and walked back to the car waiting at the curb. Mark was behind the wheel, his face a mask of fury as he slammed the accelerator and sped away. I closed the door, the sound of the engine fading into the night, and leaned against the wall. Their downfall wasn't complete yet, but the cracks were spreading faster than I expected. And I wasn't going to stop until everything they had left was gone. The silence after Lily's late night plea didn't last. They weren't finished, not by a long shot. Their pride wouldn't let them. I could almost hear Mark's voice drilling into her head, telling her she deserved more, that I had no right to win. That was the problem with both of them. They believed they were owed something. But the truth was, everything they touched turned to dust the moment they betrayed me. The next blow came through the courthouse. Mark filed an emergency petition demanding half of my assets, parading himself as the scorned husband. The irony was sharp. He claimed I had abandoned him, twisting reality into a performance he hoped a judge would believe. His lawyer painted a picture of sacrifice, of a man who had given up years for me, only to be discarded. I sat through every word, calm, my attorney cutting through their lies with the precision of a blade. The judge didn't even hesitate. The house was mine. The inheritance was untouchable. Mark's claims were dismissed in one clean ruling. Lily sat in the back, her face pale, her hands clenching the edge of the bench as though it were the last thing holding her upright. Afterward, they tried another angle. Friends. Family. They reached out to mutual acquaintances, spinning stories about how I had locked them out unfairly, how I was cruel. But the truth had already spread. People weren't sympathetic. Betrayal travels faster than excuses, and soon they were the couple no one wanted near. Calls went unanswered. Invitations disappeared. The world they thought they had built together began folding in on itself. I didn't need to lift a finger. All I did was stay quiet, watchful, steady. Their downfall was happening on its own. But Mark couldn't accept defeat. Desperation made him reckless. One evening, I came home to find him standing on the porch, fists clenched, his face lined with fury. He wasn't calm, he wasn't charming, he was a man unraveling. "You think this is over?" he growled. "You think you've beaten me?" I didn't flinch. "It already is over, Mark. You lost the moment you chose her." His eyes burned, but behind them, I saw something hollow. Fear. He knew the truth. He had gambled everything and walked away with nothing. Lily appeared behind him, her expression worn, her voice breaking. "Please, Claire. We don't have anywhere to go. We've been sleeping in the car. We're running out of money. Just let us inside for one night." Her words hung in the air, heavy. For a brief second, I wondered if this was the lowest point of their fall, or if they could still sink deeper. But then I remembered every moment I lay in that hospital bed, alone, while they were exchanging vows and drinking to their new life. I remembered how quickly they had erased me. "No," I said simply, and closed the door. The next day, the cameras caught them trying again. Not begging this time, breaking. Mark attempted to force the back gate open. Lily followed, trembling, whispering for him to stop. The alarm screamed, and within minutes, police cars lined the street. I watched from the upstairs window as officers handcuffed Mark, his shouting filling the night, while Lily sobbed on the curb, her head in her hands. It didn't take much to press charges. Trespassing. Attempted break-in. He was dragged into the system, his arrogance stripped away in a courtroom where no one cared about his charm. Lily wasn't charged, but her image was broken beyond repair. She disappeared from social media, her perfect smiles erased. Weeks turned into months. I never saw them together again. Word spread quietly. Lily left town, moving into a small apartment far away, taking whatever odd jobs she could to survive. Mark tried to fight his record, but the stain followed him. No one wanted him in their offices, no one trusted his promises. And me? I walked through the house one evening, the same house they had thought would be their prize, and for the first time, it felt like mine again. Every corner no longer whispered with betrayal. It stood as proof, not of what they had taken, but of what they couldn't destroy. I stood by the window, watching the street where they had once parked, where their laughter had turned into shouting, where their pride had crumbled into begging. The air felt lighter now, the silence no longer heavy. Their betrayal almost ended me, but instead it ended them.